The camera fades in slowly, revealing a bustling cityscape bathed in golden sunlight. People hurry along the sidewalks, cars honk impatiently, and the distant echo of laughter mixes with the hum of life. Then, the screen darkens slightly. A soft, emotional piano melody begins to play. The narrator's voice cuts through gently. Welcome back to Swift Tale, the place where real stories touch the heart and remind us of the beauty still left in this world. If you're visiting for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because today's story is one you'll never forget. The camera slowly pans to a man in an expensive suit, standing in front of a luxury car. He looks powerful, confident, but his eyes are empty. Then, across the street, a frail woman sits on the curb, holding a small cardboard sign that reads, "Hungry, please help." Their worlds couldn't be more different. Yet in a few moments, those two lives will collide in a way no one could have imagined. "Let me ask you something," the narrator continues softly as the screen fades between the man and the woman. "What if the person you once saved became the one who saved you in return?" This is the story of Ethan Cole, a billionaire who thought he had everything, and Ava, a black woman who once saved his life when she had nothing. Years later, fate would bring them face to face again, but this time, their roles would be reversed. What began as a simple encounter on a cold city street would unravel into one of the most powerful stories of redemption, humanity, and unexpected grace you'll ever hear. Ethan Cole was a man defined by success. To the world, he was brilliant, a visionary who built a financial empire from the ground up. But behind his perfectly tailored suits and flawless smile hid a man who'd forgotten what it meant to care. Money had become his measure of worth. Power had become his comfort. He'd built walls so high that no act of kindness could break through until destiny intervened. On the other hand, Ava's story couldn't have been more different. Life had never been kind to her. Born into struggle, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, Ava learned early that survival meant sacrifice. Yet even when life gave her little, she gave everything she could: her time, her heart, her hope. And years ago, when she came across a young man trapped and bleeding after a terrible accident, she didn't hesitate. She saved him, not knowing he'd one day be one of the richest men in the city. Now, years later, the same girl who once saved a stranger's life was begging for food on the same streets where his luxury cars rolled by. What are the odds? What does fate mean when it brings 2 souls back together after so long? Is it coincidence or destiny? Some stories remind us that every act of kindness plants a seed, the narrator continues. And sometimes, when life seems hopeless, that seed blooms when we least expect it. The camera zooms in on Ava's trembling hands holding a small paper cup. The city around her moves fast, people pass by, pretending not to see. But the moment Ethan Cole's car stops nearby, time seems to pause. He glances at her briefly, dismissively at first, until recognition flickers across his face. His world shifts, his breath catches. That face, those eyes, he's seen them before. Ethan Cole sat in his penthouse office, overlooking the glittering skyline, a man at the top of the world, yet trapped in a silence money could never fill. His empire stretched across continents. His name was printed in magazines beside words like genius, visionary, and self-made. But behind the gleaming glass walls and polished mahogany desk was a man haunted by a question he couldn't silence: why does it all feel so empty? Every morning began the same way: the aroma of imported coffee, the distant hum of traffic below, the sterile glow of screens filled with numbers, charts, and profits. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom: "Sir, the Tokyo investors are online too." Ethan nodded, though his eyes were fixed on nothing. The deal was worth billions, but in that moment it felt meaningless. Success had become routine, predictable, hollow, like a song he'd heard one too many times. He had built everything from the ground up. Orphaned at 16, he'd promised himself never to depend on anyone again. He worked through nights, slept in his car, and clawed his way to the top. The world called him relentless, ruthless, a man who turned pain into profit. But what the world didn't see were the scars beneath the suit, the ones carved by loneliness, by loss, by a childhood of unanswered prayers. In the quiet hours, when the city lights faded and the world outside his window slept, Ethan often found himself staring at his reflection. The man staring back looked powerful, yes, but also tired. His eyes, once bright with ambition, now carried the weight of years spent chasing something he couldn't name. There were nights he'd wake up drenched in sweat, hearing echoes of a memory he couldn't fully recall, a voice, soft and urgent, calling his name from the darkness. A flash of headlights. The sound of breaking glass, then nothing. That memory, that night, was the only thing in his life that didn't fit neatly into his empire. It was a mystery wrapped in gratitude and guilt. Someone had saved him once, long ago, when he didn't deserve it, but he never found out who she was. As he looked out over the city, a sharp voice cut through his thoughts. "Sir, the investors are waiting." Ethan blinked, straightened his tie, and turned away from the window. "Let them wait," he muttered. He didn't know why, but something inside him felt uneasy, like the universe was stirring. He walked out of his office, surrounded by employees who greeted him with polished smiles and respectful nods. They saw power, they saw money, but none of them saw the man inside, the one who, despite owning everything, felt utterly alone. That night, after another meaningless business dinner, Ethan drove himself home through the city streets. It was raining, the kind of soft drizzle that painted the world in reflections. As he waited at a red light, he caught sight of something, a woman, soaked and shivering, sitting near the curb with a small cardboard sign. His eyes lingered for a moment, then turned away. The light turned green, and he drove on. But for some reason, he couldn't shake the image from his mind. Her eyes, there was something about them, something familiar, something that stirred the part of him he'd buried long ago. He reached his mansion, parked the car, and sat in silence. The rain tapped against the windshield like a heartbeat. "Why do I feel like I've seen her before?" he whispered. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the armor of his success, a memory began to awaken, a memory of a girl's trembling hands, her desperate voice, and the warmth of her touch as she pulled him from the wreckage years ago. The world had not been kind to Ava. Once, she had dreams as bright as the morning sun, dreams of becoming a nurse, of building a life where she could help others and bring hope to those who had none. But dreams, she learned, didn't always survive reality. Life had been a series of battles for her. Growing up in a small apartment on the south side of the city, Ava was raised by her grandmother after her parents passed away when she was just a child. Her grandmother always told her, "Kindness costs nothing, baby, but it can change everything." Those words became Ava's compass through a world that often seemed cold and unfair. Even as life grew harder, Ava never lost her light. She worked double shifts at a diner, took night classes, and cared for her grandmother until the old woman's final breath. When her grandmother passed, Ava's world collapsed. The little savings they had were eaten by hospital bills, and soon she found herself facing eviction. She applied for jobs, sent out resumes, and stood in long lines at hiring centers, only to be turned away again and again. Months turned into years. She sold what little she owned just to eat, and yet, through every hardship, Ava held on to her compassion. Even when she had nothing, she still found ways to give a smile, a kind word, half a sandwich shared with someone who had less. That was who she was, someone who believed in goodness, even when the world didn't. One freezing winter night, Ava found herself sitting beneath an old bridge, wrapped in a thin blanket that barely kept out the cold. Her stomach ached with hunger, and her body trembled from exhaustion. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, "God, just one more chance, please." The next morning, she stood outside a coffee shop, hoping to find work, or at least some warmth. But the looks she received weren't of kindness. People averted their eyes, some clutched their bags tighter, a few even crossed the street to avoid her. The sting of their judgment hurt more than the hunger. That's when she saw it. A luxury car stopped at the red light nearby. Its sleek black body glistened under the sun, the kind of car only the rich could afford. Through the tinted window, she caught a glimpse of the man inside, his sharp suit, his polished watch, the distant look in his eyes. For a brief second, their gazes met. Ava didn't expect anything. She was used to being invisible. But there was something about that man, something that stirred a distant memory. She couldn't explain it. She only knew that his face felt strangely familiar, like a shadow from another life. She shook her head and looked down, ashamed of her condition. How far she had fallen, from the girl who once saved a stranger on a rainy night to the woman now begging for food. But what she didn't know was that the man in that car, the one she just looked at, was that very stranger. As the light turned green, the car pulled away and Ava sighed. "Another day," she whispered, clutching her sign. "Just one more day." She didn't know it yet, but fate had already turned its wheel. The man she'd once saved was about to return into her life, not as a stranger this time, but as the key to her redemption. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The rain drummed softly against the tall glass windows of his penthouse, but his thoughts were louder than ever. He kept seeing her face, the woman on the street, her eyes tired yet filled with something hauntingly familiar. Every time he closed his eyes, flashes of his past came rushing back, headlights blinding him, a car skidding out of control, the metallic taste of blood, and then her voice. Soft, trembling, desperate, calling out to him. He sat up in bed, his heart pounding. "It can't be," he whispered to himself. He turned on the lamp and reached for a dusty box tucked beneath his nightstand, a box he hadn't opened in years. Inside were old newspaper clippings, a cracked wristwatch, and a photograph taken by a bystander the night of his accident. The article headline read, "Young woman saves crash victim in storm, leaves before police arrive." He stared at the grainy photo, the girl's face half-turned, soaked in rain, her hands stained with blood. Though the image was blurry, he could never forget those eyes, the same eyes he saw today. Ethan stood abruptly, his pulse racing. He went to his computer and pulled up security footage from the dash cam in his car. He scrolled through until he found it, the moment he stopped at the light, the camera catching her face clearly for just a second. When he paused the frame, his breath caught. It was her. The girl who saved his life years ago was now living on the streets. A heavy silence filled the room. For a long moment, Ethan just stood there, staring at the image on his screen. All the wealth, all the power he had, and yet he'd somehow let the one person who once saved him fall through the cracks of society. Guilt flooded his chest. "How could I forget her?" he whispered, running a hand through his hair. He grabbed his coat and keys and rushed out, ignoring the curious looks of his staff as he stormed through the lobby. His driver hurried to catch up. "Sir, where to?" "Downtown," Ethan snapped, "and step on it." The city at night was a blur of lights and reflections as his car raced through the streets. Ethan's eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, searching for her. "She has to be here," he muttered. But the streets all looked the same, faces blurred, lost in the motion of the city that never cared. Finally, near an abandoned shopping plaza, he saw a small figure huddled beside a lamppost, holding that same cardboard sign. The rain had started again, and she was drenched, trembling. His heart clenched. "Stop the car," he ordered. Ethan stepped out, his expensive shoes splashing into puddles. Ava looked up, startled. Her first instinct was fear. She wasn't used to men in suits approaching her kindly. "Hey," Ethan said softly, his voice trembling. "Do you remember me?" Ava blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, sir," she began, but then she froze. Something in his eyes sparked recognition. She tilted her head, studying his face beneath the streetlight. And then it hit her, the scar above his right brow, the same scar she remembered from that stormy night. "You," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're the man from the crash." Ethan's throat tightened. "You saved my life." For a moment the world stood still. The sound of rain softened, cars passed by unnoticed, and it was as if time itself had paused for them. Two souls, bound by fate, finally face to face again, one who had been saved and one who had been forgotten. Tears welled in Ava's eyes. "I didn't think you even remembered me," she said softly. Ethan's voice cracked. "How could I forget? I've been alive all these years because of you." He took off his coat and gently wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth of the gesture broke something inside her. Years of pain, humiliation, and struggle finally cracked open, replaced by a flood of emotion she could no longer hold back. For the first time in years, Ava cried, not from hunger or fear, but from the weight of being seen. Ethan helped her up, his voice low but steady. "You're coming with me, you've suffered enough." And as they walked to his car under the falling rain, the city around them seemed to blur, as if destiny itself had been waiting for this moment. The moment when kindness, long forgotten, would finally be repaid in full. The ride to Ethan's mansion was silent, except for the soft hum of the car engine and the rhythmic tapping of rain on the windows. Ava sat quietly in the back seat, wrapped in Ethan's coat, staring at the city lights flashing by. Her mind was spinning. She couldn't believe what was happening. Hours ago, she was begging for food on the street. Now she was sitting inside a billionaire's luxury car, next to the man she once pulled from a wreckage years ago. Ethan glanced at her occasionally, his heart heavy with guilt. Every time he saw the way her hands trembled or how she tried to hide her worn-out shoes, he felt the sting of shame. How did I let this happen? He thought. How did the woman who saved me end up like this? When they arrived at his estate, Ava hesitated before stepping out. The house looked like something out of a dream, towering glass walls, marble floors, chandeliers that sparkled like stars. She felt out of place, small and fragile against all that wealth. "Come in," Ethan said softly, opening the door for her. "You're safe here." She followed him inside, clutching his coat tightly. The warmth of the house enveloped her, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel the cold biting through her skin. A housekeeper appeared, startled by the sight of Ava, but Ethan's stern glance silenced any questions. "Prepare a guest room," he ordered, "and bring her something warm to eat." As Ava sat at the dining table, a bowl of hot soup steaming before her, tears filled her eyes. She hadn't had a proper meal in days. She whispered a quiet "thank you" before eating slowly, savoring every bite. Ethan sat across from her, watching silently. The guilt in his eyes was unmistakable. "You don't have to thank me," he finally said. "If anything, I should be thanking you." Ava looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For saving me when no one else would," he said. "I was a stranger, bleeding, unconscious, and you risked your life to help me. I never even got the chance to thank you properly." Ava smiled faintly. "You don't need to. I just did what anyone would have done." Ethan shook his head. "No," he said firmly, "not everyone would have done what you did. The world isn't kind like that anymore." The two sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft clinking of her spoon against the bowl. Then Ethan asked gently, "How did it come to this? How did you end up out there?" Ava hesitated, her eyes lowering. "Life happened," she whispered. "I lost my grandmother, lost my job, lost my home. Every time I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. And eventually, I just stopped expecting help from anyone." Her voice cracked, and she wiped away a tear. "It's funny, isn't it? You save someone's life, and years later, you're the one who needs saving." Ethan's chest tightened. "Not anymore," he said quietly. "You don't have to struggle alone anymore. Whatever you need, food, clothes, a home, I'll take care of it." Ava shook her head quickly. "I can't accept that. You don't owe me anything." Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I owe you everything. Without you, I wouldn't even be here. Let me do this, Ava, not out of pity, but out of gratitude." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for sincerity, and found it. For the first time in years, she felt safe, not because of the walls around her, but because someone finally saw her worth again. That night, as Ava lay in the soft bed of the guest room, wrapped in clean sheets, she stared at the ceiling with tears in her eyes. She whispered a silent prayer of thanks. Down the hall, Ethan stood by the window, watching the rain fade into dawn. He didn't know what it was, guilt, gratitude, or something deeper, but something inside him had shifted. For the first time in a long while, he felt human again. He didn't know it yet, but bringing Ava home would change both of their lives forever. Days turned into weeks, and Ava slowly began to adjust to her new reality, one she still couldn't fully believe. Every morning, she'd wake up in a warm bed, the soft sunlight streaming through the curtains, and for a brief second, she'd wonder if it was all just a dream. But then she'd hear the faint hum of the mansion coming to life, footsteps in the halls, the aroma of breakfast drifting from the kitchen, and she'd remember she wasn't out on the streets anymore. Ethan kept his word. He didn't just offer her shelter, he offered her dignity. He arranged for new clothes, helped her get medical checkups, and even made sure she saw a therapist to begin healing from the trauma of homelessness. But what touched Ava most wasn't the luxury or comfort, it was how Ethan treated her. He never made her feel like a charity case. He spoke to her like an equal, listened when she talked, and gave her the one thing she hadn't had in years: respect. One morning, as they sat having breakfast, Ethan looked up from his laptop and said, "Ava, I've been thinking, I need help managing one of my new community projects. We are setting up a foundation for underprivileged families. Would you like to help run it?" Ava froze, her spoon midair. "Me, but I don't have any qualifications for something like that." Ethan smiled gently. "You have something more valuable: compassion. That's something money can't buy or teach. And besides, who could understand their struggles better than someone who's lived through them?" Ava's eyes filled with tears. "You really believe I can do this?" "I don't just believe it," he said softly. "I know you can." And so Ava began her new role at the Cole Foundation, a nonprofit aimed at helping the homeless find food, shelter, and jobs. At first, she was nervous, unsure of herself, but Ethan was always there to guide her. Slowly, she started to bloom again. Her confidence returned, her smile grew brighter, and she began inspiring everyone around her. Ethan watched her transform with quiet awe. There was something radiant about her, something that no amount of wealth could ever replicate. He'd spent his life surrounded by people who wanted his money, his power, his name. But Ava was different. She didn't want anything from him. She only wanted to help others. One afternoon, he found her in the foundation's office, laughing with a group of volunteers as they sorted donations. Her laughter was soft, musical. It filled the room with warmth. For a moment, Ethan just stood at the doorway, watching her. Something stirred deep within him, a feeling he hadn't known in years. That evening, they shared dinner in the mansion's garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson. Ava looked around at the flowers, smiling. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "It's peaceful. I used to sit out here and wonder if all this meant anything: the house, the cars, the money. But lately," he paused, glancing at her, "lately, it feels like I finally understand what it's for." Ava tilted her head. "And what's that?" He smiled faintly. "To do something that matters, to help people who deserve a second chance like you gave me." Ava looked down, her cheeks warm. "You already mattered, Ethan. You just forgot how to see it." Their eyes met across the table, and for a few moments, neither of them spoke. The air between them shifted, gentle, unspoken, electric. For the first time, Ethan realized that his gratitude for Ava had begun to evolve into something deeper, something he couldn't yet put into words. But Ava, too, felt something she didn't dare admit. She had built walls around her heart to survive, but with Ethan, those walls were slowly coming down. As the evening breeze swept through the garden, carrying the faint scent of roses, they sat together in silence, two broken souls who had somehow found healing in each other. Neither of them said it out loud, but in that moment they both knew this was more than a second chance. It was the beginning of something beautiful. Ethan Cole was a man who had faced ruthless boardrooms, billion-dollar deals, and international negotiations without blinking an eye, but lately, a single smile from Ava could undo him completely. Every time she laughed, every time she spoke about helping others, something inside him softened. It was strange and frightening at the same time. He'd built his entire life on logic and control, but around her, none of that seemed to matter. He began finding excuses to be near her. Lunch meetings suddenly took place at the foundation. Evening dinners became longer, conversations deeper. He loved hearing her talk, not about himself or his world of wealth, but about hope, about people, about the small things that made life worth living. Ava, on the other hand, was cautious. She admired Ethan deeply and was endlessly grateful for everything he'd done for her, but she also knew what it felt like to lose everything. The last thing she wanted was to misread his kindness as something more. Still, she couldn't ignore the way her heart fluttered whenever their eyes met, or the way he looked at her, like she was the only thing that made sense in his complicated world. But outside the warmth of their growing bond, the world was watching, and not everyone approved. One morning, as Ava walked into the foundation, a woman in a sleek grey suit was waiting for her, Victoria Lane, Ethan's longtime business associate and public relations director. She was tall, confident, and carried herself with the kind of authority that came from power and privilege. You must be Ava, Victoria said, her smile polite but cold. I've heard a lot about you. Ava smiled nervously. Nice to meet you. Victoria's eyes swept over her outfit, modest, neat, but clearly not designer. Ethan speaks highly of you, she continued. In fact, he seems unusually invested. Ava frowned slightly. He's just helping me rebuild my life. He's been very kind. Victoria murmured, folding her arms. Kindness is one thing, but Ethan isn't known for being sentimental. You must have done something extraordinary to earn that. The words stung, but Ava forced a small smile. I just did what anyone would have done. Victoria's gaze sharpened. You saved him, didn't you, years ago? Ava hesitated, surprised. He told you. Oh, he didn't have to. I did my homework. You see, Ethan's image means everything to this company, and I can't help but worry that this connection between you two might draw the wrong kind of attention. Ava felt her heart sink. I don't want any attention, I'm just trying to do good work. Victoria gave a thin smile. Then keep it that way. She turned sharply and walked off, her heels echoing through the hall. Later that day, when Ethan found Ava sitting quietly at her desk, he could sense something was wrong. You're quiet, he said softly. Did something happen? Ava forced a smile. Nothing important. But Ethan could see through her. Ava, he said, stepping closer, you can tell me. She hesitated, then sighed. Someone from your company talked to me today. She made it sound like I don't belong here, like people will judge you for helping me. Ethan's jaw tightened. Victoria, he exhaled sharply, his voice low with frustration. She doesn't understand, let me deal with her. Ava shook her head quickly. No, Ethan, please don't. I don't want to cause trouble. You've done enough for me already. Ethan looked at her, his chest tightening. Ava, you are not trouble. You're the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. The words hung between them, heavy, honest, dangerous. Ava's eyes widened slightly, her breath catching. Ethan, she whispered, unsure what to say. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world outside seemed to fade, no sound, no time, just two souls standing on the edge of something they couldn't name. But before either could speak again, Ethan's phone buzzed, breaking the silence. He glanced at the screen, a call from his board of directors. Reality pulled him back. We'll talk later, he said softly, his voice regretful. Ava nodded, though her heart ached. As he walked away, she whispered under her breath, You don't have to fight for me, Ethan. I just don't want to be the reason you lose everything. But what she didn't realize was that Ethan was already fighting a battle inside himself, between his loyalty to the world he'd built and the love quietly blooming in his heart for the woman who once saved his life. And as fate would have it, that battle was about to come to light in the most unexpected way. The sun had barely risen when Ava's phone began to buzz non-stop. Dozens of messages poured in, from co-workers, neighbors, and even strangers. Her hands trembled as she clicked on a link someone sent her. It was a news article plastered across every major outlet. Billionaire Ethan Cole caught in scandal, mysterious woman from the streets linked to his fortune. Below the headline were photos of her, candid shots of Ava leaving the foundation, carrying files, smiling beside Ethan at charity events. The captions twisted everything. Former beggar manipulates billionaire benefactor, one read. Another said, gold digger or miracle worker. Sources say the boss is emotionally compromised. Her vision blurred with tears. This wasn't what she wanted. She had fought so hard to stand on her own feet, and now the world painted her as someone scheming for wealth. She sat on her bed, her phone buzzing endlessly as her heart sank deeper into despair. Across town, Ethan sat in a glass-walled conference room with his board of directors, every face around the table stern and judgmental. Victoria Lane was there too, her expression unreadable. The board chairman leaned forward, sliding a newspaper across the table toward Ethan. This is all over the media, Ethan. The company's reputation is at stake. Investors are nervous. You need to make a statement immediately. Ethan's jaw tightened. A statement? Yes, Victoria said smoothly. Something simple. Clarify that Ava means nothing to you, that you were simply helping out of charity. Once we clear the air, things will settle down. Ethan's hand clenched around the paper. Say she means nothing? The idea made his stomach twist. Ava had saved his life, reignited his humanity, and given him purpose again. Denying her now would destroy the very thing that made him human. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. No, he said firmly, I won't lie to protect an image. Victoria blinked. Ethan, he cut her off, his tone sharp. That woman risked her life for me when no one else cared who I was. She didn't do it for money or fame or power. She did it because she's good. And if the world can't see that, then maybe it's the world that needs fixing, not her. The room went silent. The chairman looked stunned. Ethan, this could cost you millions. The board. I don't care, Ethan interrupted. If the price of telling the truth is losing everything, then so be it. He grabbed his phone and stormed out. Within an hour, the world saw a live video broadcasted from Ethan's verified account. Standing in front of the media, dressed in a black suit, his voice was steady but filled with emotion. You've all seen the headlines, he began, but before you judge, let me tell you who Ava really is. Years ago, when I was in an accident that nearly took my life, Ava, a complete stranger, pulled me from a burning car and waited with me until help came. I didn't even know her name back then, but I never forgot her courage. He paused, his gaze unwavering at the cameras. When I met her again, she was struggling to survive, not asking for anything, just trying to live with dignity. I helped her because she once helped me, and if that makes me a fool, then I'll gladly be one. The reporters shouted questions, but Ethan ignored them. To the people who call her a gold digger, you're wrong. To those who mock kindness, you've forgotten what it means to be human. Ava is not my project, not my scandal, and not my shame. She's the reason I'm alive, and I will not apologize for caring about her. The video went viral within minutes. Millions watched, and the internet exploded with support. Hashtags like Stand with Ava and Real Hero flooded social media. People began digging deeper into Ava's story, uncovering the truth of how she once saved Ethan's life and how she'd quietly been helping others ever since. Meanwhile, Ava sat on the edge of her bed, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched the live broadcast. For the first time in years, someone had stood up for her publicly, not out of pity, but out of love and respect. When Ethan finally came to see her later that night, she could barely speak. Why did you do that? She whispered. You've risked everything. He looked at her softly, stepping closer. Because you're worth everything, he said simply. Ava felt her heart twist, a warmth spreading through her chest. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this wasn't another dream that life would cruelly take away. But before she could respond, a knock echoed at the door. A man in a dark coat stepped inside, the same police officer who had once arrested Ava months ago. He looked uneasy. Miss Ava Williams, he said carefully, we need to talk. There's been a development. Ethan frowned. What kind of development? The officer sighed. It's about the night you saved Mr. Cole's life. There's more to that story than either of you realized. And with that, the truth that had been buried for years was about to surface, one that would shake both of their worlds to the core. The room went completely still. The faint hum of the ceiling fan was the only sound as the officer unfolded a thin file from under his arm. Ethan's expression hardened, his instincts as a strategist kicking in, but Ava just looked confused, fear flickering behind her tired eyes. What do you mean, more to the story? She asked quietly. The officer sighed, his tone heavy with hesitation. When we re-examined the traffic records from the night of your accident, Mr. Cole, something strange came up. The original police report claimed the driver who hit you fled the scene, but after cross-checking the recovered dashcam footage, we found a name. Ethan's brow furrowed. A name. The officer nodded slowly. The car that struck you belonged to a man named David Williams. Ava froze. Her heart seemed to stop mid-beat. What did you say? She whispered, her voice trembling. The officer looked between them. David Williams. He died in a collision the same night, about 2 miles from the crash site. We think he was trying to get help. According to the registration records, he paused, lowering his gaze. He was your father, Ava. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs as the revelation sank in. Her father, the man who caused the accident that nearly ended his life, the accident that made him the man he was today, was her father. Ava's knees buckled, and she sank into a chair, tears welling in her eyes. No, that can't be right. My dad died trying to save someone, that's what they told me. The officer nodded sympathetically, and maybe he was. Based on the footage, it looks like he swerved to avoid another car, yours, Mr. Cole, and lost control. He wasn't drunk, he wasn't reckless. He was trying to prevent a worse crash. In a way, he saved you too. Ethan's throat tightened. His mind replayed the burning wreckage, the chaos, the faceless figure who had dragged him out, Ava. But now, realizing her father had died in the same incident, the truth twisted painfully inside him. Ava looked up, her face pale. So all this time, the man I saved was the same man my father died protecting. Her words trembled in the air. Ethan moved closer, but she flinched, the weight of the truth too heavy to bear. You didn't know, he said softly. Ava, none of this is your fault. Tears streamed down her cheeks. But it doesn't change what happened. My father's gone, and you've been carrying the pain of that night for years. And now you know why. Ethan knelt in front of her, his hands trembling as he reached for hers. Your father didn't take something from me, Ava. He gave me a second chance. And you gave me a reason to live it. She shook her head, sobbing quietly. I can't face you right now, not after knowing this. Before Ethan could stop her, Ava stood and ran out into the cold night, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. The officer hesitated, watching her leave. She didn't know, sir. I could see it in her eyes. Ethan nodded faintly. I know. His voice was barely a whisper. He walked to the window, staring at the city lights that blurred into the darkness. The weight of fate pressed down on him, the cruel irony of it all. The girl who saved him had been carrying the shadow of the man who'd caused his suffering. Hours later, Ava sat alone on a park bench, staring at the moonlit sky, her father's words echoing in her memory, always do good, even when life doesn't. She had followed that advice all her life, but tonight it felt like goodness had betrayed her. As the wind whispered through the trees, a car pulled up quietly behind her. She didn't turn, but she knew who it was. Ethan's voice came softly. You shouldn't be out here alone. She didn't look at him. Maybe I should. Maybe that's what fate wants, for me to stay away from you. He walked closer, standing beside her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Fate doesn't want us apart, Ava. It brought us together for a reason. Ava finally turned to him, her eyes red. A reason? You lost everything because of that night, your peace, your trust, your old life. And that all started with my father. How can you still look at me and not see his face? Ethan exhaled, his voice trembling with emotion. Because when I look at you, I don't see the man who caused my pain, I see the woman who healed it. Silence filled the air. Ava's tears fell again, but softer this time. He took her hand, gently, carefully, like he was afraid she'd vanish if he held too tight. Ava, I don't care about the past. I care about what's in front of me, you. For a long, fragile moment, she didn't pull away. And for the first time, the pain that had divided them began to fade, replaced by something deeper, something stronger than either had felt before. But even as their hearts began to mend, neither of them knew that one final test still awaited them, a moment that would decide whether their bond was truly meant to last or destined to break forever. The morning after the revelation, the world felt different, quieter, heavier, as if both Ethan and Ava were walking through the echoes of their pasts. The truth about the accident had spread quickly. The media that once glorified their story now sensationalized it again, calling it the most unexpected twist in the billionaire's life. Everyone had an opinion, but neither of them cared anymore. This wasn't about the headlines, it was about healing what had been broken. Days passed before Ethan saw Ava again. He searched every place she could be, the foundation, the small cafe she loved, even the park bench where she often sat to think. Finally, one rainy evening, he found her there, sitting beneath a flickering streetlight, lost in thought, holding an old photo of her father. He approached quietly, his umbrella sheltering them both from the drizzle. "I was beginning to think you never let me find you," he said softly. Ava looked up, her eyes tired but calmer now. "I needed time," she whispered, "to think, to understand why life would bring us together this way." Ethan knelt beside her, his voice low but steady. "Maybe because we were both broken by the same night, and only together could we heal from it." Ava looked at him for a long time, searching his face for anger, resentment, anything, but all she saw was sincerity. "You really don't blame me?" she asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. "Your father tried to save me, and you did save me in more ways than one. If he could see you now, he'd be proud. He'd want you to stop carrying his guilt and start living his legacy." Tears welled in her eyes. "I've spent years trying to be strong, but I'm so tired, Ethan." He gently took her hand. "Then lean on me, you've carried enough for a lifetime." Ava finally let herself break, crying softly as Ethan pulled her close, holding her like the fragile, beautiful soul she was. The rain poured harder, washing away the pain, the guilt, the lies. It felt like the world itself was cleansing their story, giving them both a chance to start anew. In the days that followed, Ethan made a decision that shocked everyone. At a massive press conference, surrounded by cameras, he announced the creation of a new global initiative, the Williams Foundation for Second Chances, named in honor of Ava's late father. Its mission was to support victims of wrongful accusations, injustice, and poverty, people who, like Ava and her father, had been misunderstood and mistreated by society. Ava stood beside him, her heart swelling with emotion as he spoke. "This foundation isn't just charity," Ethan said to the world. "It's a promise that kindness still matters, that truth can heal, and that forgiveness is the greatest power we have." The crowd erupted in applause, but for Ava, the moment felt personal. She looked at Ethan, eyes glistening, and whispered, "You turned my pain into purpose." Ethan smiled gently. "No," he said, "we did that together." From that day forward, the two became symbols of hope, not because of their wealth or fame, but because of their courage to forgive, to rebuild, and to love in a world that often forgot what those things meant. Months later, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Ava and Ethan walked hand in hand through the foundation's garden, now bustling with volunteers and families their work had helped. She turned to him and asked quietly, "Do you ever think about how different life could have been if that night never happened?" He smiled faintly. "Sometimes, but then I remember if that night hadn't happened, I'd never have met you." She laughed softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Maybe fate isn't so cruel after all." "Maybe," Ethan said, looking out at the setting sun. "Maybe it just needed us to see what second chances really mean." And with that, their story, born of tragedy, tempered by truth, and healed by love, came full circle. And that, my friends, is how pain can become purpose, how forgiveness can rewrite destiny. Ava and Ethan's story reminds us that sometimes the hardest truths lead to the most beautiful endings. Broken right red. If you're visiting Swifttail for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that touch the heart and challenge the soul. And tell me in the comments, what did this story make you feel? Would you forgive if you were in Ava's place?